Welcome, folks. This is Inside the Leader's Mind, and I am David Susan. Welcome. I'm so excited for our guest today. Our guest is Kim Barnes. She's an author, entrepreneur, thought leader in the field of leadership and development. And her company, Barnes and Conti Associates, has been in the leadership development business for more than 40 years. She's the designer of She's the designer of many leadership development programs, has published books on influence, which we're going to talk about, and constructive debate, as well as internal consulting. Kim, welcome.
Thank you very much, David. Happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. I know we've chatted a little bit previous to this. I really interested in hearing how you got to where you are today, doing the leadership work, the influence work, and
Mm.
everything.
Well, I started out as a second grade teacher, and I'm not sure things have changed that much since then, but they have, of course. Um, but I did that for many years. I was involved in special education for kids with learning problems. Then I began working with teachers, and then I went on from there to work with other adults and got very interested in leadership, studied it, worked with a lot of leaders and began Barnes and Conti, as you say, about 40 years ago. And we have focused very much on helping leaders be more effective, more successful. And our definition of the word leader is pretty broad. So not only the work we do is not only for people that are official and have titles as leaders, but also for those who are leaders because of their skill, because of their relationships, because of their abilities. So there are lots of different kinds of leaders that we work with.
Well, I love that you designate that because so often people will say, "Oh, leader is you only have a specific title," but I really believe everyone is a leader in their own right. And you don't have to have a title to lead. I mean, that's something I talk about a lot in my keynotes and my presentations. So as you look at leaders, and we can put them in double quotes or whatever, as you look at leaders, what do you think makes a leader, one leader better than another? And I don't mean they're battling it out. I just mean in general, you think about great leaders. What is it they're doing differently? They're doing better than others.
Well, I think in the first place, to be a leader, you sort of that implies that there's a destination. And I think the best leaders have a pretty clear idea, even though it may change, but they always have a destination in mind. In other words, where am I going to be leading people to? Okay. And there are a lot of leaders or people who think of themselves or are considered leaders who I think are confused about that. And it's very difficult to lead people somewhere if you don't know where you're going. I think there's something in Alice in Wonderland about that.
I
Yes,
want
if
to
you don't know.
elaborate on that because that's fascinating when you say some leaders don't know where they're going or they don't, however you phrase that. What do you mean by that?
I think there are people that recognize that they have a set of responsibilities, that there are some people that report to them, um, but they haven't really uh, either been told, in some cases, bought into, or created a sense of the destination they want to lead people to. And I think sometimes people think of it as a title or a set of responsibilities, but not as part of a journey.
Why do you think this happens in an organization?
Well, I'm inclined to say it's because people haven't done very good leadership development, and that people don't see it um, as as something that they have to embody, as something that they have to. communicate as something that they have to make important to other people in the organization.
It's interesting.
The
There's
the word leadership can mean a lot of different things, and I think unless um, an organization is pretty clear about what they mean by leadership, um, it is very difficult for people to fulfill the expectations that may not be clear.
Yeah. It's fascinating that you said this. You're one of the first that's really said this and articulated it, this kind of definition of leader. It's not just having people or getting work done through others, which is one way I look at leadership, right? Because I don't need employees. I don't need a team if I could do it all myself. But more importantly, it's true. It's leading it. What is the destination? Where are we going? And I was going to say there's a trend now with OKRs, right? Objectives and key results, where they're trying to get greater alignment in organizations because of this exact problem is that it's like, okay, here's where we're going. But along the way, especially in these bigger corporations and some of the corporations I work with, is we kind of lose track of that and we kind of get and I guess here's the question. Do you see that people are kind of caught up in their own little world and they kind of forget the bigger picture of that with that alignment?
I do think so. I think people get maybe early on they have a sense of the destination, but then they get very caught up on, well, how are we going to get there? And they lose track of where they're going.
What the
Um,
destination
and
is.
yeah, I mean, you really have to keep that in front of you if you're going to get other people to go there with you.
Well, it's kind of like you're a boat out on the ocean. You know where you start, you go, okay, I know where we're going, but along the way, you stop looking at the map and you're just worried about, hey, is the ship floating? And you're like, great, we're doing a great job. We're getting there. We don't know where we're going, but man, we're getting there really fast. That's
Well, I
hilarious. I
think
love that.
it was Lewis Carroll. I think it was Lewis Carroll who said, "If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there."
I love that. I love that quote. When you look at organizations and you look at people we'll call it leadership to your broad definition, right? You don't have to have a title to lead. I know you do a lot of work in influence. Tell me a little bit about that and the importance of influence in leadership or in a corporation or business.
Well, you said it earlier, David. You probably can't do absolutely everything yourself in order to achieve important objectives that you personally have or your organization has. So you need to be able to get something done through other people that is done in order to help you get where you want to go, right? And so influence is the way we do that. Influence is a two-way process. I influence you, you influence me. It's a peer-to-peer kind of relationship, regardless of what your titles might be. Um, in other words, if I say you do it basically because I'm your boss, I'm not influencing you, I'm using power, right? And if I try to get you to do it without do something without being clear and honest with you about what it is I want you to do or why I want you to do it, that's probably going to be done through manipulation. But influence is done openly. You're very clear about where you want to go, what you want the other person to do to help you get there or to help themselves get there. Um, and it's a kind of communication that has an objective attached to it. Okay. So in other words, I'm not just telling you this because it's interesting. I'm telling you this because there's something, some action that I would like you to take in order to achieve this.
So y- I know this is a focus of yours. What is the big benefit that you see of individuals that are better at influence this way versus threat intimidation, manipulation? How is it helping? What are the benefits to the individuals? What's the benefit to the organization?
Well, it's always easier to get things done if the person to get things done through someone else if that person is doing it willingly and they're choosing to do it. And the thing about influence is people make a choice to act. Okay. And if you've influenced them successfully, their choice is going to be, yes, I will do this. If you are not successful, um, maybe you need to change your timing. Maybe you need to change the the action that you're asking them to do. Maybe you need to get someone else to do it and influence them. So um, it's a broad topic, but it is one that is essential to leadership. You know, knowing how to influence others in order to achieve things that you couldn't achieve by yourself.
Yeah. When you look at your own leadership style, you've got a team of individuals, right, that you work with, or um, what would you say your greatest leadership strength is, or in it could be now or in the past, doesn't matter. But what do you think your greatest leadership ability skill is?
Well, one skill that I have is asking people questions. And I do think the job of a leader is to identify the destination and invite people to go there with you, but not necessarily to tell them how to do it. So it's really a good idea if you're able to invite people to participate in the conversation about how are we going to get there? What's the best way to go? Who do we need to engage? You know, who else needs to be part of this? What are some things we need to do first in order to be able to get to where we want to go? So um, I think I'm pretty good at including people, involving people, asking people how to do something in a way that's successful for them and successful for me.
And would you say that that is your leadership superpower, or do you have another superpower?
I think my other superpower is I'm really flexible. Which is if it doesn't work this way, let's try another way. And one of the things that we teach when we're teaching people to be better influencers is we make sure they've got a lot of different skills so they don't have to do it the same way all the time or to everybody. So we teach them some behavioral skills. We teach them a way of establishing objectives. We show them a way to plan for an influence opportunity, and always to keep that objective in front of them. So you can tell, am I getting closer or am I getting farther away from what I'm trying to achieve?
And how much do you have to use these approaches, skills in your own organization, you personally?
Um, I think I think I've internalized them so much, David, that I probably use them most of the time. Um, if I'm if I find myself doing something else, I better have a good reason for it. In other words, there are going to be times in any leader's experience where you have to use power if you have it. Um, it's the fire in a crowded theater or the burning platform kind of thing. So there
Right,
are
you don't
certainly
have time
times.
for right, you don't have time to kumbaya. You just got to get it done.
Well, and I don't consider influencing kumbaya,
Right,
but
right. But
it does take more time.
it takes more
It
and
does,
more thought
and more thought,
and more
absolutely, and
patience.
yes, and more curiosity, I would say. So I think one of the underappreciated um, skills, if you will, uh, of leadership is curiosity. I don't necessarily have all the answer, or maybe I don't have the best answer. So, what do you think? What are some other options? Well, we could do it that way, but what else could we consider? So it's recognizing that the people that you lead have ideas, that they have probably some different ideas and maybe even better ideas than you have, and tapping into that. If I already know everything, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I better get in another room because I'm not going to learn it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, what's the I don't know if it's Confucius, the whole thing when your cup is full, something like when your cup is full, there's no room to add more or something like that. You gotta, yeah, basically, once you think you know it all, it's the same idea. What do you think,
I'll, sh-
go ahead, sorry.
I'll share a brief story with you about that.
I
I
would
was
love that.
once working with, yeah, I was once working with a young leader who had fairly recently been put in this particular position. And he was having a terrible time. That's why I was called in to work with him. People were quitting his group. He wasn't getting anything done. People seemed to resent him, and he just really couldn't figure it out. And so I, I learned a little bit from talking with his boss and talking with some of the people that he worked with. And I said, I'd like you to try an experiment. It turned out he was one of those people that always had all the ideas. He liked being the smartest person in the room. And so I said, in the next meeting that you're having, where there's going to be a customer there, I'm going to ask you to keep quiet for the first hour of the meeting. After that hour, fine. Um, so he did that. And I came back to meet with him afterward. And I said, how'd it go? And he said, well, it was kind of amazing. So I really had to keep my mouth shut, and it was very hard for me. But I was very surprised that as the meeting went on, the people on my team had a lot of ideas. They were really helpful. They came up with some act, actions that could be taken. The customer was really happy, and even when the hour was up, I actually didn't have anything to say except thank you. And he was amazed because he had never considered the possibility that other people might have what was needed in
Imagine
the
that.
situation.
Yeah, imagine that other people actually have some smart ideas too. I love that. I love that. As you look at organizations, folks you've worked with, leaders, especially today, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges leaders are facing in today's world, especially as it relates to leading people, teams, things like that?
Mm. Well, there are many, and they're different for different people. But among them, I think there's some generational issues that um, the people who are coming into leadership now um, are quite different from the people that were have been there for a long time. These people are not only digital natives, but they're people that are very used to being very fluid and flexible and working in a lot of different ways. And they're used to having a lot of autonomy. And so for people that are from previous generations, that's a little harder for them to handle. And so they need to learn some something about keeping their mouths shut and their ears open and using their curiosity to find out. Maybe you'll learn something from these new folks. So that's one thing. And I'm not talking about leaders that are in their 60s and 70s. I'm talking about middle-aged people that are now coming into senior positions and needs. I think one of the biggest needs that we get called on a lot is for them to learn how to influence rather than simply uh, communicating and hoping things will happen, or try to use power and hoping things will happen. So influence is really the key skill that uh, we get asked to teach, and that I think is really important right now.
Is in the work you do, you kind of alluded to it. Is there a uh, general demographic age you tend to do more work with? Meaning, is it in that age range? Is it the younger? Is it that 40 to 50? What do you see a trend there?
In recent years, we've been asked quite often to work with emerging leaders.
Yeah.
In other words, the people that are going to be the next senior leaders. And these are generally people in their 30s and 40s. Okay. And so more and more, those are the people that we see in our classes and for coaching as well. Yeah.
Right. When when you look at your own situation, we talked about different generations and stuff. What are some of the challenges that you personally deal with on your own teams?
I think anybody who's a leader will have similar challenges. You know, um, how do you make sure that you're creating an environment where each person can do their best work? How do you make sure that people are in a position to learn and get better? How do you create an environment where people feel free to speak up, feel free to share their ideas, feel free to correct you if you're wrong about something, to be creative? So, being a good leader is always about creating a climate that enables other people to do their best work. And that's true for me as well as
And what tips would you give for other leaders that are aspiring to have that?
well, use your curiosity, talk to people and find out, what really works for you. What how can I support you in doing what I would like to see you doing what you want to do? And that may be, providing them with some kinds of resources that they need. It might be in um, setting up meetings with them to talk through what's going on. It might, and it's going to be different for different people. It, it might be sending them to um, learning opportunities. So there are a lot of different things, but it all depends on your being willing to talk with each person to get to know them, to find out what their needs are, to find out what their ideas are, what their hopes are, what they can teach you.
I want to jump on, not jump on, but I want to. There was a word you said in there. You said they have to be willing to. One of the things that I do a lot of deep work in this arena of the idea that people know what to do, but we don't do it. I'd love your take on that. Why, you teach influence, but they don't do it, or you coach them, or you do other training sessions, and they know what to do. They have the knowledge, but they don't do it. My analogy that I use in my keynotes, I talk about how we know what to do to get fit. We know you eat right, exercise more, but we don't do it, which is why it's a multi-billion dollar. And in leadership, there's not a lot of, I don't say there's not a lot of new ideas, but I go to the bookstore or you go online and there's thousands of books on leadership and people are like, I'm trying to be a better leader. I'm like, it's all there. So we know what to do. We don't do it. I would love your take on this idea of they have to be willing. What do you think?
Sure.
What do you think is the inhibitor? And do you have ideas on how to get people past that?
First, I have to say that you can read Lao Tzu or things that were written thousands of years ago about leadership, and it's not that different. Okay.
Sure.
Um, I I think everybody has a default, um, kind of where you're comfortable, where you feel like you know what you're doing. Um, you have a sense of competence, and it's very hard to try something new um, without falling back into your default. Okay. So I might have gone to a course and learned how to speak differently or influence differently or negotiate differently. But when I'm in the real situation, it's always tempting and easy and sometimes um, almost impossible not to fall back into my comfort zone. So I think that's uh, part of the self training that's involved uh, when you've learned something new is you have to put yourself over and over again in positions where you have to use that skill. And ideally you do that before it's, the money game, before it's the big deal. Okay. And and you want it to become part of your repertoire so it's not scary to use it when you're in a new situation. But that means you have to practice it. You can't just go to a class and learn it and then hope it works for you when you finally try it out. You have to make it part of your normal everyday behavior, and that means you try it out a lot, you practice it, you ask for feedback from people you trust.
I love that. I love that. It reminds me of sports. In sports, you learn a new technique, and it's not like you say, "Okay, I learned it," and then you have, let's say golf, you got the golf tournament, next month, and expect to know it. It's you got to make it that muscle memory, and it's all that practice that leads up to the time you need it. And I think that's the mistake is for whatever reason in business people don't do this. They practice live. It would be like, here's this technique, but I'm not going to practice it until I'm actually in the tournament. And that's what they do. And then they fail at it. And then they wait till the next tournament to try it again. Versus this is the routine. And I think the word that comes to my mind is intentional. It's got to be intentional.
No, but you also need some backup. I used to work with somebody that coached athletes, top athletes, and he didn't coach them to do the physical thing. He coached them to do the mental thing.
Mm.
And what he taught me, I think, is the importance of not only teaching people how to do something well, but how to recover. Okay, and that when you're playing sports, it's really important for you to be able to recover when you make a mistake because you're always going to make a mistake.
Right.
The same thing is true with influence, with leadership. Um, Being aware of what happens when this doesn't work.
Right.
What what backs that up? How am I going to recover? And when you practice, if you really want to move forward, you're going to practice with somebody that'll challenge you, so that what you do doesn't always work, and you get a chance to try your recovery strategy.
Right. And that's where mentors, coaches can come in.
Yeah.
Peers and your peers, having a peer that you can go back and forth with and say, hey, let's hold each other accountable. Kind of like a workout buddy. It's the same idea.
Oh, totally. In fact, we use that metaphor quite a lot.
There you go. Tom, I want to wrap with one last question, and then I'll ask you how people can reach you, etc. But last question is this: what is a question you wish people would ask you, but they don't? They don't know to ask you about anything.
I think it's useful to ask people, to ask me or anybody else, how did you come to that conclusion? That's a kind of question when people ask me, it really makes me think and it really makes me question. And it may help me to actually shift my opinion, uh, my suggestion, um, by having to explain why I think that's true. And I think that's one of the most powerful things you can do. Rather than if you disagree with somebody, for example, rather than getting into an argument, it's much more useful to be curious and say, well, how did you come to that conclusion? And listen as the other person explains it. And then you can say, well, here's how I look at it. But you're doing that from a position of knowledge. And so that, again, I say curiosity is one of your best
There you
skills.
go. And how'd you get to that conclusion? Love it. Love it. How do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about what you do, your business, etc.?
Sure. Um, they can find our website at www.barnesconti, just all one word, barnesconti.com. And we have a website that will um, give you information about our classes, various books that we have available, and a few other goodies, resources that you can use. So that's the best way. You can um, reach me by email at bkbarnes, Barnes, at barnesconti.com. And I'm always happy to hear from people and almost always have an opinion. So
Yeah,
you'll,
I love it.
and if you like, you can read one of my books. Um, Exercising Influence is one. Um, oh, hmm, trying to think of the name.
But
Yeah,
that's the big
I have
exercise.
I have also written 2 corporate mystery stories with
I,
an OD
I like,
consult does the
but they'll
protagonist.
find more. They'll find more on your website, I'm sure. But exercising influence would be one.
Building Better Ideas, which is about a process we call constructive debate. Um, okay, so those are the
We can always use constructive debate.
oh, indeed, indeed.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, Kim, you have been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on my show. I so appreciate it. And ladies and gentlemen, folks, everyone listening, thank you so much for being with me today. Kim, thank you again. I appreciate you.
And thank you. It's been fun.
All right. Bye,
Bye.
folks.